At one point, I was down 45 buy-ins. Basically, I was down $1 million. I won $8 million in online games. You really have to love it. People who get into it for the money, they fizzle out. It's really tough.
Hey, this is Colin from Blackjack Apprenticeship, and I'm joined by Phil Galfond. Phil has been a professional poker player for roughly 20 years and has over $10 million in poker winnings. Phil, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, my pleasure. Happy to be here.
So roughly 20 years ago, you got into poker. What led you into poker?
Even before then, as a teenager, I played card games with my friends. It was kind of the main thing we did when we hung out. One of my friends from that group of friends, when we were 19, he won a tournament online for $30,000 on Party Poker. And so it became the talk of our friend group. And he actually reached out directly to me and said, you know, Phil, I've picked up a couple books and I've been actually studying this. I think you'd be really good at it. And I love to gamble, so that was all it took.
Does he get some commission on your career winnings for getting you into it?
I need to reach back out to him and get him a nice gift.
Yeah, a nice steak dinner or something. What do you think it is about your personality that made it such a good fit?
I love playing games. I always have loved playing games, and I'm very competitive with myself. I wouldn't say so much with other people, but those two things, like I loved video games, I loved sports, and yeah, it's just exciting and fun.
It can't be just playing games because you have to seriously study to get good at this.
Yes and no. So when I started 20 years ago, nobody really knew what they were doing. I mean, that's an overstatement, but games were a lot easier, and it was just the only resources out there really were books, that many of which were not very good. And if you found the right couple books, I did that, then found some forums, the 2+2 forums they were called, where a lot of strategy discussion was happening. And I was winning pretty quickly. I mean, at like $10 an hour, but within a matter of months, a few months.
And what was your training like just as your career progressed?
At some point, there were some crude tools where you could calculate equities, calculate how things would go if you shoved all in a tournament situation, where you had to manually enter what everybody would do. It was kind of a pain, but actually I found that really helpful to go through the manual process and figure out which factors influence things the most. And then training sites, I would say, were the biggest leap for a lot of people. So professionals started making videos where they would record their screen, record themselves playing, and talk about why they were doing what they were doing. And so I learned a lot from that. And all in all, honestly, the biggest leaps in my game have come from working with other people. Occasionally coaches, but mostly just peers studying together. I just think not only for the shared knowledge, but the motivation, the emotional support in a very stressful game. I think it's huge.
And how long was that kind of growth period from, what did you start with?
So I deposited $50. I lost it. I deposited $100 and I didn't lose it. So I was playing $10 sit and goes, which is a 10-person tournament. You pay $10 to get in. It pays the top 3 spots. And from there, I kind of moved up the sit and go ladder over the next year and a half until I had $100,000 in my bankroll, and then I dropped out of college. And at the same time switched to cash games. And I played 5-10 cash games, which are $1,000 buy-in. Once I dropped out and was playing full-time, it happened pretty fast. Now, I was always somebody who got really excited about competing in bigger and bigger games. I liked to gamble a little too much. And so my bankroll management strategy was I would build up more and more bankroll, and then I would move up like way too high and take a shot for just a few buy-ins. And then I would often lose, step back down and build it up again. And I don't recommend that for most people, but for me, it really worked because that shot was so exciting for me that it really motivated me to grind in between those shots. And eventually at different points, you know, I like kind of leapfrogged 2 stakes because the shot actually stuck. And then I think by the time, so I must have started, I started playing in 2004, and it was 2008 that I had my biggest year still to date, and won $8 million in online games. And those were $60,000 buy-in and $100,000 buy-in cash games.
What's the highest stakes you've played?
The highest stakes I've routinely played are 500, 1,000 blinds, which is $100,000 buy-in. I have once played 2,000, 4,000 blinds, which is $400,000 buy-in. I've once played a $1 million buy-in tournament, but those were one-offs. Routine 501k.
Did you find emotionally a difference?
Yes, sort of. So, I mean, when I was playing the 2,000, 4,000, when I played the $1 million buy-in tournament, I was like anything above what I was already playing, I was just selling to other people. So it was the same stakes for me. Now there is still an emotional difference in just playing a tournament where people buy in for $1 million. It's pretty nuts. And so I did feel a lot of pressure, not as much for the money because it was similar stakes for me that I've been playing otherwise. And I had been used to playing with other people's money, and I only would take investors that I was good friends with. And we knew that you try your best and that whatever happens, happens. But there's from the kind of prestige element, it was the first ever $1 million buy-in tournament. I really wanted to do well. I didn't. But yeah, that was exciting and scary.
So those people that are at the very top that seem to just win tournament after tournament, what is it that they have that other players don't?
There have been throughout the years like a couple of very notable tournament after tournament winning years, especially at the highest stakes. So I think most recently over the last few years, a good friend of mine, Jason Kuhn, has just had huge tournament success. Several years back, Fedor Holtz won like everything, all these high rollers. You have guys like Phil Hellmuth who, at very different events, but the World Series of Poker has more bracelets than anybody by quite a bit. I think it's different things. So in Hellmuth's case, and others who you see winning a lot of World Series of Poker bracelets, it's actually it's skill and volume. These days there are, I think, over 100 World Series of Poker tournaments a year where they award bracelets, and just playing a lot of them gives you more opportunities too. Now, these high rollers where guys like Fedor, Justin Bonomo had a really good run for a while after Fedor, Jason Kuhn. High-level skill is a prerequisite, but anybody who's just had one of these huge years or two, they've been lucky a little bit during that time. It's just there's no way around it. All of those players are world class, and as far as what makes them great, it's actually different for each of them. Honestly, the few players I mentioned, I actually don't know Justin as well in terms of his game, but Jason Kuhn is super methodical and studious, and he just works harder than anybody. And he has such a knack for memorizing ranges in different spots. And so for him, I think it's study and knowledge. For someone like Fedor, he was more intuitive of a player, and in my opinion, had a really good feel for what other people were doing and how to take advantage of it in that very moment, in that one particular hand. So there are different ways to go about it, but you have to be elite to have one of those runs, even with the luck.
We were talking earlier about you have to know the game optimal strategy. I'm screwing that up. What's it called?
Game theory optimal.
Game theory optimal. But then you also have to adapt based on your opponents. How important is adapting to your opponents, and what does that look like?
This is a bit of a controversial question in the poker world.
Nice.
So some people believe that you shouldn't do much adapting, at least at higher stakes where everybody's pretty good, and you should just try to play as close to game theoretically optimal as possible. I'm in the other camp. I think it's all about adapting to your opponents. I think that every single player, even the players I was just talking about, someone like Jason Kuhn, who's probably as close to GTO as anybody in the world right now, is still missing GTO in a lot of spots. And so everybody in the world, the game's way too complex to just memorize the GTO strategy. And so players are missing. And if they're missing in one direction more often than not, which almost everybody is, it's a matter of figuring out which direction that is, and then logically deducing what to do about it. But there's an opportunity to take advantage, and that's where bigger edges come, because a lot of strategy. So, for example, if we were playing rock paper scissors, a GTO strategy is that I would throw each 1/3 of the time, because if you know that I'm doing that, there's nothing you can do to beat me. But also, I'm not going to beat you if I throw rock 1/3 of the time, paper 1/3 of the time, scissors 1/3 of the time. Whatever strategy you use, we're going to break even. And it's not exactly like that in poker, but I think that illustrates that going for just GTO, oftentimes it means that if you're much closer than your opponents, you're usually not going to be losing. But you can't win as much as if I have a tell on you and I know when you're going to go rock like 80% of the time, then I need to adapt. And that's how I get a really big edge.
That's really interesting. What have been some of the most challenging moments or parts of your career?
There have probably been a few, but the most recent one comes to mind more readily. And so this was 2020, and I had been away from the game working on my business for a while. And I wanted to get back into it in a way that actually promoted my business too. So I created the idea of, I called the Galfond Challenge, where I would play against players one-on-one, heads up PLO, which is my specialty, although it was before I took years off. And in the first match, it was 25,000 hand match, which was like a 3-month match, playing 4 days a week for 6 hours a day or so. So it's a lot of poker against one opponent. And there was a lot of fanfare. We hyped it up a lot. And I started playing and I started losing. And started losing a little bit, was still having fun. And the losing just continued in a way that like I was not at all expecting. Now I was playing against somebody, I didn't know if I was better than him or not. I think he was the favorite in the public markets, but it was kind of close. But anyways, he just was crushing me. And this is my first return to poker in years on a very public stage. And at one point I was down 45 buy-ins. So we were playing 100, 200. This was in euros. But basically I was down $1 million, which at these stakes, it was just a massive amount to be down. And there was no real way for me to come back and actually win the challenge. And I had to decide if I wanted to quit, throw in the towel. There was a side bet element, but like that was kind of out the window. So I just had to decide if I wanted to challenge myself to win from that point on and win some of the money back. If I thought I could kind of prove to myself and others that I could hang with him, I decided to come back and play. Actually, it was like a story, like a fairy tale, a storybook ending where I actually got all the way back to even. We went into the final 100 hands, neck and neck. And at the last second, I won a big enough pot to have me win the match. And it was like extremely unlikely. As badly as I ran at the beginning, that's how well I ran afterwards. There was absolutely luck involved in that comeback. But at the time where I was down a lot and everybody's saying Phil should have stayed retired, he's way out of his league. That was challenging.
That is an intense story on so many levels.
Yeah.
Like putting yourself out there publicly, that takes a lot of courage or balls or something. And then that the decision wasn't, well, I still want to win this, but I want to see if I can perform better on the back half of this than the first half. And then of course,
it went, well, I guess, so you asked me earlier what qualities draw me to poker. And I kind of spoke to it, but really, I think the biggest thing is that I just have a really strong desire to challenge myself, to set a really high target and achieve it. And I mean, I don't always achieve the targets that I set, but kind of poker is such a great way to challenge yourself against other players and against yourself, against the swings. And so that is what I'm drawn to in any aspect of life, but poker really kind of feeds that need for me.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, piggybacking off of that, what would you say is one of your proudest achievements in poker?
That was my proudest achievement. If I had to go one before then, was in 2008 when I won my first World Series of Poker bracelet. That was a very big, I wouldn't say chip on my shoulder, but I really wanted to win something in the public eye where I guess at that time I was a high stakes online player, but online players were not really recognized the way that the TV pros were. And the general public didn't know anything about us, even though kind of we felt we were better than everybody that they knew about. And so I did, I guess, have a chip on my shoulder and wanted to prove that I could win. And really, winning a single tournament, there's a lot of luck involved, but it still felt like such a breakthrough for me, and it meant a lot to me.
Yeah, I'll bet. That's like me and my first back off.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. Did you ever look into card counting or any other forms of advantage play over the years?
I mean, I learned basic card counting strategy. Like I never really tried to apply it. When I was in high school, I was playing some, offshore online blackjack, and I remember I was a senior in high school, and somehow I went on like some huge heater where I had deposited like $300 and turned it into $2,500. And I mean, like I think I knew enough to know that that wasn't sustainable, but I guess maybe not fully. And I was just like, man, I'm a blackjack player now, and I couldn't pay attention in school. Obviously, I lost it, or lost most of it. But no, I never really. I don't know, poker. I just loved it so much that there was no desire to look elsewhere.
Yeah, I found that generally, poker and casino advantage play tend to attract different kinds of people, and people. Like the joke for me and my card counting buddies is like, oh, don't invite Colin to our poker game. He's a card counter. And it's like, no, that doesn't really mean anything. It's different skills. They both involve cards, but that's about it.
Yeah, we do as poker players like a joke that poker players, I mean, it's not really a joke, but an inside thing is every time we tell people we're poker players, the most common question we get is, oh, you count cards.
I'll bet. So how has poker evolved over the years?
It's changed a lot. When I started playing, it was the beginning of online poker's poker boom. Chris Moneymaker won the main event, and then poker just exploded. And the games were plentiful. None of us knew what we were doing. There was a lot. It was like a wild, wild west. We were figuring it out as we went, and I found that really fun. As the tools progressed, as training resources got better and better, and specifically in I'm struggling to remember now, but like the early 2010s, when the first poker solver came out, which told you the actual right way to play, given certain parameters, but basically the right way to play, that revolutionized the game because we had all been using logic and experience to determine what optimal strategy was, but we didn't really know. And at that point, it became provable, more or less, what optimal strategy was. And so it introduced a lot of elements that introduced a lot of strategies that we had never considered, and changed the game drastically. And to be honest, when that first happened, I was pretty sad about it because I loved I'm just going to figure it out. I'm more of a figure outer than a studier. And it kind of pulled me away from the game a little bit. And when I went away to do business, I just had a lot to do on the businesses that I started, but also I was kind of worried about my ability to succeed in poker long-term after the advent of solvers. And when I finally came back, and the story I told you, that was the first time I had studied solvers, was when I came back to play the Galfond Challenge in 2020, so long after they'd been invented. And what I learned was kind of the same skills that applied before then still apply. And the solvers, they were new information, they were helpful, and the requirements for studying went up to compete at the highest levels, but your creativity and aptitude still matter a lot.
Where do you see the future of poker going?
As far as solvers, the game's been solved, but the tools, their improvement from here will happen in two ways. I think one, and the most important way, is just ease of use, just being more user-friendly. Right now, a lot of the tools are just, most people will look at them and just say, no way, I'm not studying that. But especially with advancements in AI, I think that, we'll see that solver data turned into actual explanations in English about what kinds of strategies to use and why. And then I think more will be done with tools with exploitative play, meaning I know my opponent's doing this a little bit wrong, solve exactly how I should counter that. Which you can do now in a very clunky way that doesn't work out great, but I think that'll get better. The main fear that I have about poker, which everybody has had for a while, is bots online. And especially, I don't know how many years into the future till, we've all got like AI glasses and we're all hooked up to the internet all the time because you can't beat a solver. You can't beat a bot. So that is a big fear of mine as somebody who loves online poker.
So with solvers and with just more training for the average poker player, Has that just made the game in general a higher barrier to make money?
It's made the average player better, but no, I don't think it makes the game tougher to get into or tougher to succeed at, because back in the day with no resources, yeah, the average player was worse, but you had no way to get really good, or rather it was much harder to get good. So I think that, all that training sites and tools do are give an advantage to players who are willing to study and willing to invest in their growth as a player.
What are the main differences between playing online versus playing a live cash game or live tournament?
Yeah, I like to say that it's the same exact game, but you have a little bit more information live. And you actually have some different information online. So live, you obviously have their physicality. Not only can you try to read tells, but you can notice if they're getting tired, notice if they're getting frustrated. There are a lot of ways that you can adjust your play based on the information you're getting physically. Online, there's also data that you can get. They're depending on the site that you play, you can use a heads-up display, which will track their stats. And so you have very precise data on how they've played, which you can utilize in different ways. So at its core, it's the same game with different kind of extra information, and depending on what you enjoy more and what kind of extra information works well for you, that one might be more lucrative for you than the other.
What do you lean towards today?
I love online play, and not necessarily because I think my edge is bigger there, but because I just love the actual game itself and kind of getting in a flow state and just sucked into it. And I find that when I'm playing live, I can't achieve that because I'm worried about keeping my body straight. I'm counting the pot, whereas online it just tells you what the pot size is. I'm socializing. I have to respond to people who talk to me, and it just takes me out of that like pure focus on the game.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. There is no online card counting, so yeah. I can't relate really, other than my brief online poker experience 20 years ago. Do you have any mentors or poker role models that have been influential to you?
Man, yeah. So I've had a lot of coaches. First coach I ever had is named Tommy Angelo, who's kind of just like a poker Buddha. And I came to him to learn cash game poker strategy because I had heard he's a great coach. And this is when I was transitioning from sit and goes to cash games. And he didn't teach me any cash game strategy. He just taught me mental game and how to be a professional. And I always say that like I didn't learn any of the things I wanted to learn, but I learned everything I needed to learn from Tommy. Later on, another mental game coach that's made a huge difference for me is Elliot Rowe. He's a mindset and performance coach and hypnotherapist. Neither like taught me game strategy, and really in terms of strategy, I've learned some from training videos, but mostly from my friends, my peers that I've worked with and studied with. So in that sense, I mean, I have a lot of people I really respect and who have helped me a lot, but we were kind of on the same level. I wouldn't consider them role models necessarily, but hugely important.
Yeah. You talked about stepping away to focus on businesses. And what made you want to start online training?
I started an online training site because I really like coaching. And I was coaching for a different business that wasn't mine. And long story short, wanted to do it differently. Thought we could do it better, and so launched my own. But I didn't really get involved in the day-to-day business, just high-level decisions. And then I made training videos, and then I played poker full-time. And then later, that was successful, and I thought we were really good at business. It turns out that we weren't. I was one of the most sought-after coaches, and we entered the market at a really good time and made a really good product. But so we launched like several other projects, all of which failed to varying degrees, and took a lot of time and money. But over that time, I learned so many lessons. And I never intended to become full-time on business, but when we had multiple projects going on, I had to, or it felt like I had to, and that kind of pulled me away from the game.
And would you say you're full-time working on business now?
In 2024, yes. I don't think forever. And, as of 2022 and 2021 and 2020, no. But yeah, it just depends when you ask me.
Okay. Are you enjoying it for now?
Kind of. I enjoy poker more, but I'm a father now, and I like starting at 6:30 and finishing at 5, and then having weekends off, and so it's fitting my lifestyle right now. But no, there's something different about poker.
What advice would you give to someone now in 2024 that's interested in getting into poker?
You really have to love it. You really have to love it. People who, and this was even true 15 years ago, people who get into it for the money, they fizzle out. It's really tough. But it can be such a fun, amazing, beautiful, fascinating game. And if you love games, if you love competing, and you have an aptitude for math, logic, psychology, then it could be something really great to get into. As it probably sounds like, it's a hard career, and I suggest people get into it very cautiously. Like, I'm careful about suggesting it. I still think there's a lot of money to be made, but it's going to take aptitude, desire, passion, and dedication.
You're running businesses. Your father. Do you have any other interests outside of poker and business and family?
No, honestly, no. That's it. I am not doing anything other than working, playing poker, hanging with my family.
Well, good. So if people want to learn from you, where should they go?
If you want to learn from me for free, youtube.com/@PhilGalfond. PhilGalfond.com is probably what I put the most time and energy into now, where you can get my newsletter. You can sign up for my newsletter. I send that out every week. And then runitoonce.com, which is the training site that I started 12 years ago. And I make videos. We have a lot of courses, but a lot of players who are playing still full-time make videos too. We have over 50 pros making videos. We put out 2 videos every single day for the last 12 years. I actually calculated it recently, and if you watched, I think it's 12 hours a day, it would be almost 2 years to watch all the videos we have. So you don't have to do that. But yeah, it's pretty crazy how much we put out.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing your story with us. And if you want to learn more, go to his YouTube channel for free or check out the websites. And if you want to learn more about Blackjack and Card King, check out blackjackapprenticeship.com or our YouTube channel.